As some of you know, earlier this week, Will Smith bitch slapped Chris Rock. As a mindset and mindfulness coach, I have a few thoughts on the matter. First, let's quickly watch the video.
Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right?
So Chris Rock makes a lame joke about G.I. Jane. Will Smith finds it funny. Jada is not impressed. What I understood afterwards was Jada suffers from alopecia, which is an autoimmune disease, which results in hair loss. Clearly, she's still suffering from that, very self-conscious about that. So very much in her head and paying attention to the thoughts in her head. So I'm guessing Will Smith first thought it was funny, but then when he saw his wife's reaction, he goes and marches up on stage. And there's Chris Rock standing there, arms behind his back, grinning. He's half the size of Will Smith. And Will Smith walks up to him with all his might, slaps him in the face. Chris Rock is 57, Will Smith is 53. Clearly, Will Smith is operating from pure ego. And then, of course, Will Smith sits down and then he...
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth.
You can see his eyes are dilated. He is still clearly in ego mode, which means the only faculties you have access to, as I've covered previously in my videos, is fight, flight, freeze. You are in survival mode. You don't have capacity to be kind, compassionate, loving, and have self-control when you are in survival mode. And that's clearly what's going on here. He is purely in his ego. And Chris Rock's reaction to being criminally assaulted in front of the whole world, I can only say he's operating from his wiser self, because he didn't freeze, he carried on. He didn't flight, run away. He's still standing there. He didn't fight back. He actually had something funny to say, something clever to say at the end.
Greatest night in the history of television.
Which suggests to say that he was still able to access his creative faculties, which means he was operating from the wiser self. I'm guessing Chris Rock meditates, because not only was he able to take that assault with dignity and grace, he didn't react, and he was able to come up with something funny. And then, of course, Will goes on to win his Oscar, gives his speech. He was still in his ego. It definitely wasn't Will's best self. He was, as in popular culture they say, gaslighting and justifying his behavior. The wiser self of him knows he was wrong and shows his true self when he apologized the next day. That was more of his wiser self. So there are three things I wanted to unpack here. One was Jada's reaction. She took offense to Chris Rock's joke. So clearly she's still suffering. She still attaches a lot of meaning and self-worth, and she's still very self-conscious, still very much operating from her thoughts and consuming her thoughts and letting all of that dictate how she feels. If you're not being present, you're in your head and you're reacting to stories and thoughts. The mindful approach to this might be to, when you're anchored in the present moment, we're not caught up in our thoughts. We're not caught up in that conversation that's talking about our self-worth because of our hair, our self-consciousness, comparing ourselves, the usual chatter and the nonsense that goes up in our head. But when we are anchored in the present moment, we're not slave to our reactions, we're not slave to our thoughts. We are free, we are in control. We're in a state of love, we're in a state of kindness, we're in a state of compassion, and we're not assuming that people are being malicious towards us. And second thing to unpack is Will Smith, his reaction. He clearly thought the joke was funny, but then he looked at his wife and saw she didn't appreciate it, attached it to all sorts of things in the past. He was very much in his head. He was very much in that self-defense mode, triggered him to then assault Chris Rock. Put it simply, he was operating from the ego. This is not the behavior of someone who is anchored in the present moment, who is operating from a spiritual place in that moment. And then the third thing to unpack was Chris Rock. It was a wonderful example of grace and dignity, of being present and being mindful, because he didn't attack back, he didn't freeze, he didn't flight, he didn't run off. He was able to say something clever, which suggests he still had access to his creative faculties. So I do wonder what's his spiritual practice. I'm willing to bet he has got a very solid one and he's been doing it for a while. Whenever we are in our ego, we're just not our best self. It's like the monster has completely taken over and it's not our best self. Just like when you get angry, it's just a moment outburst. You regret how you acted in that moment, don't you? We always do. So that's one thing we need to be careful, not to suddenly think that his whole character is a complete asshole, because he's not. The fact that he apologized the next day properly shows that, yes, that wasn't me, that wasn't my best self. So there are 3 lessons that we can learn from this. 1, we can't live our life expecting people to mind their words and behave a certain way just so we can come out and be comfortable and present our best self. Because that's an incredibly disempowering way to live, which is what Jada demonstrated in her reaction. So instead, what we can do is, no matter what you say to me, I get to choose how I want to feel. And I choose to laugh at that joke. Or even if someone is actually insulting you, they can still offer you the gift. You just don't have to accept it. What would I do if I was Will and Jada? First, I would meditate. Because what meditation does is it allows you to have some sort of self-control. Because as the Navy SEALs say, when you're under pressure, when you're under stress, you don't rise to the occasion. You sink to the level of your training. So if there was some sort of meditation practice that has occurred, you'll still get angry, but you might have some modicum of self-control to stop yourself from actually getting up and going and slapping someone. Or you walk up there and instead of slapping, you might say something. Given that reaction suggests that there is no meditation practice there whatsoever. So that's the first thing I would do if I was both of them. I would start meditating. It helps take us out of our head and bring us into the present moment. Science has shown it thickens your prefrontal cortex and it helps you tame those extreme emotions and makes it more equal. That's the experience I had anyway when I started meditating for 1 hour a day. The next step is to accept what's happened. Just accept it and let it go. Because what otherwise will happen is, what is probably happening, you're in your head, what I should have said, what I could have said, what I wish I'd done, or thinking about what the reactions are, the useless thoughts, the shame, the guilt, the regret, all of this. Crowd out those thoughts with thoughts of forgiving yourself, love and kindness and compassion towards yourself. Speak to yourself like your best friend would speak to you. Will Smith's best friend, what will he be telling Will Smith? He won't be saying, "You idiot." His best friend's not going to say that to him. His best friend's going to console him. You made a mistake. Just let it go. We'll just deal with whatever is coming. And then you've got to accept the consequences. Because there will be consequences. You can't get away with that, right? Another lesson, don't always assume the worst in people. There may be an assumption that Chris Rock knew of Jada's alopecia. Likely he didn't know that. Watch this video next where I meditated for an hour a day and I showed you how it helped me stop getting angry and reduce my reactions. Anyway, what did you think? I'd love to know. Share in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in another video.